when you ask someone, oh, what do you identify with? Sometimes they'll go, oh, the country I was born in first, and then I'm whatever, second. Because if you ask me, Hana, what do you identify as? I'm like, oh, I identify as a Muslim American. But it should be, I am human first. I identify as a person.
You always hope that it's going to go away, or you're going to get to the point in your career, in your life, where it doesn't matter as much. And then you just get hit with the realization that actually it never goes away.
We need to, as a society, work towards making sure that all of these different groups have the same access to everything that they need, all their basic rights of, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. They all have rights to that. And so as a society, we need to make sure that we can give these to everybody else. And that, to me, is why social justice is so important for our society today.
So I'm Cristina Flesher-Fominaya.
My name is Hana Abdulkader.
My name's John Chan. I like to go by my middle name, which is Thomas.
My father was American from the United States, and my mother was from Spain.
I am from San Luis Obispo, California.
I was born in, the United States on the East Coast. I moved to the West Coast when I was 2 years old.
I identify as an American Muslim.
I'm Asian, but I'm not really not from a super Asian household.
On the SAT, I answered other because there's too many things to count, and I don't think it's fair to categorize your race as just one thing.
And I am an associate professor at the university.
And for my future major, I'm going into engineering.
I'm to be attending Cal Poly Slow Animal Sciences.
Social justice, I think, the word social makes us think about society and about people and about the way that society's institutions are organized. But I think we can't really think about social justice without thinking about every other kind of justice. So when we think about social justice, we need to think about economic justice. We need to think about political justice. We need to think about environmental justice. We need to think about the legal system and the justice system itself. So we need to think about all of those things when we think about social justice, because they're all related to each other.
Yeah, I think social justice is about equity. And so equity, to me, is a concept of sort of making sure everybody's on the same playing field. For example, I know there's this one cartoon graphic where it shows multiple people of different heights trying to look over a fence at a baseball game. And equity is represented as where they have the different platforms for the different people of different heights so they can all see over the fence. And so that really struck with me on how, what is social justice? What is equity to me? Well, it's making sure everybody has the ability to access all the same things as the other people, despite their social standing or their ability or whatnot.
In society, we tend to see a caste hierarchy shown. Some things I've observed is over time, it's always us versus them, because cultures always have their norms, their taboos, all these things that set people different from one another. And social justice, I think, is trying to make those levels of differences more equal, more balanced, because it's supposed to promote the minority, the lesser heard voice is what I consider social justice. It's not just race, gender, sexuality, anything. It's being able to have respect for people and make sure people get the basic need of respect they should have as a human being.
Yeah, I guess the thing that worries me the most when I look at social movement groups for people is how quickly people want to jump all over everybody else if they don't exactly share their exact ideology and their exact beliefs. And, it's not good for discussion. It's not good for reflexivity. And people, you got to remember that whoever you're talking to is a human being who has feelings. And if you're just going to jump all over people, they're going to leave. So one of the things that I do and have done for many, many years is I study social movement groups and what makes them work and what makes them not work. And not taking care of people's emotions and not being so quick to just jump down people's throat, especially people who are new, who are maybe just figuring stuff out. Maybe you've already gotten to the point where you can analyze things really quickly. You've got your whole narrative all worked out. Maybe they have their heart in the right place, but they haven't quite gotten the furniture of their mind organized around a particular issue.
I think for social injustice, I mean, it depends, right? In the United States, I think women are probably the largest, oppressed minority. Like, I'm being 100% serious here. All over the world, they don't have rights to do basic stuff. Like, women in Saudi Arabia can't drive cars. In the Middle East, they're pretty much just married away as soon as they're old enough to be married. And they're a large sort of group. But I think in America, I think that the largest oppressed group right now, I mean, I don't want to play the oppression Olympics here or not, but I think people who are part of, the LGBTQ community, a lot of them are oppressed because of their, sexuality, and some of them because of their gender, right? Those who are trans, those who are intersex. And I think those people, it's really hard for them because they don't really have control over that kind of stuff, right? I mean, if you're born intersex, you can't really do anything sans an operation. If you're born gay, it's not like you can stop being gay.
I have definitely experienced social injustice throughout elementary school, middle school, and high school. I was the only Muslim female at my schools. I was the only one wearing hijab. That was difficult. I've had some really rude comments over my time sitting in a math class. You're doing work and you overhear a conversation to the side saying, "Oh, we should kill all Muslims." And you're like, what the heck? You're right there, and a seat across from me is talking to his buds about how cool it is to do that and how they shouldn't be in the country. And it's like, I was born in this country. I was born here. And in middle school was tough when I started first wearing hijab, because I remember some people try to tug it off being like, what does your hair look like, hon? I'm like, you know what my hair looks like. You saw it yesterday and today's my first day wearing it. A lot of cancer jokes. One thing that really bothered me is when people would start making jokes about it. They're like, what is it called? And I said, oh, it's called a hijab. And they're like, oh, a hijab? And they would start dabbing. And for them, that was so funny. But for me, it was just like, this is my culture. Why would you make fun of something like that? And it's just, people don't understand. They only think about their culture and not what significance other things have to other people. And Instagram and social media was such a big factor on meme culture. And meme culture, I think, is the biggest social injustice that happens, because there was a lot of memes regarding ISIS and just news about ISIS and how they would shout Allahu Akbar before throwing a bomb and things. For me, Allahu Akbar is the call. It is God is great. It's what I say before a prayer. And I remember walking down the halls in middle school and a kid slamming down a binder next to me and yelling Allahu Akbar. And it was just a tough thing to do because I was the only one. I had no one to talk to. And yes, I have my family, my brothers, but it's different when you're a girl and you're by yourself and just trying to figure out who you are as a person and being subjected to all these different things. What I find interesting when you ask the question, who do you think is most targeted for social injustice? I think it is women, because even across the world, you see women are always put second. And it's interesting because in some countries, depending on your race, you're put higher, but it's a constant variable of being a woman and being less than a man is seen. Because men are biologically different than women, and women are biologically different from men, but there's power that comes from that. And I think people need to open their eyes to that and express equality between the two sexes.
Every woman in the world, no matter what class, color, or background, has experienced this in some way or another. From the very first time that they were told that they couldn't do something because girls don't do that, or because boys do that. The fact that you can't walk on the street and feel safe at certain times a day or in certain areas is already a form of injustice. And we don't think about it necessarily in that way. Double standards that we're put to, having to be twice as good at everything to get the same recognition as a man who's maybe half as good.
I actually do know someone who has experienced social injustice. When this whole coronavirus situation started, one of my mom's friends, she said that her parents were, I think one of their neighbors, they were white, and my mom's friends are Asian, their parents are Asian, and her friend's parents' neighbors were, I think they did something they probably I don't remember exactly what, but they like did something like, derogatory towards them because they were Asian, and the whole coronavirus situation, they were blaming them for that. So, that felt like I was kind of horrified by that story. Really sort of opened up my eyes to how social justice, is more than just equity. Sometimes it's also about making sure that everybody has their rights protected. Asians are definitely disadvantaged because we're sort of viewed as the model minority previously. And so, there's high expectations for us to do well. And now that's sort of shifted against us because now, the Asian people don't really have any problems with discrimination, which is, I think, completely false. I think you should be race blind, and you should just, if someone does a job better than someone else, they should get the job. It's that, nothing special. Part of the issue is, this conflicts with equity quite a bit because someone might come from like a disadvantaged group or, a minority that didn't have the same access as people who had, the access to these like programs. And because of that, they don't get as far in life. And it's hard to reconcile the two, I think. And I think that if you really want to work towards social justice, you need to start from the bottom at the education level rather than at the top at the jobs and the higher level. I think that judging people based on their ethnicity is unfair, and I think it's not even the best way to sort of go about doing it. Like socioeconomically, a person who's poor and white, will have more in common with someone who's poor and black than with someone who's rich and white, right? I think we've sort of moved beyond race, and we've gone into this era where people equate race with ability or advantage or disadvantage, when in reality it's about your access in terms of your wealth. Sure, partially your social class can be determined partially by your ethnicity, but at the end of the day, your social class, not your ethnicity, defines what kind of access you have.
Anything that causes oppression is something that is not enabling human beings to reach their full potential and to live a full life. And anything that doesn't enable you to live a full life and reach a full potential also doesn't let your community and your society do the same things. And we know that the more diverse and plural societies are, the better they function, the better their economies work. And we need everybody. We need everybody's capacity to be able to take on those challenges. And when we deny whole groups of people's wisdom and knowledge, we're not accessing that. What it means is that the society is organized in such a way that these beliefs and these systems of oppression keep getting reproduced again and again. And because they're institutionalized, and because also we've internalized them as cultural beliefs, and we grow up hearing and getting the message again and again that these things are natural, that they're normal, that that's the way the world is supposed to be. And so when you fight for social justice, what you're doing is you're trying to dismantle those belief systems and the institutions that support them to show that, in fact, no, the world doesn't really have to be this way. It's this way because somebody created this in this way, and because we are actually keeping that status quo going through all these different things that we're doing or not doing.
Some demonstrations of reform and social justice are not good because people put their own biases into how they think reform should be. Like we see with lighting stores on fire and rioting. I don't think that's the best way to get social justice, even though it proves a point, there should be social justice. I don't think it's the way. You should reflect on your society. Is it smart and is it responsible to do? And think about how you apply social justice and how it will be seen from generations to come. Because what you do has an impact on the future, and the future will be modeled by our actions.
But it makes me really sad when people focus on all the things that separate them, all the differences between them, and forget who the real enemy is. The real enemy isn't the feminist who doesn't think exactly like you. The enemy is patriarchy. If you can just respect and say, okay, you believe in this, I don't believe in this. Well, what do we share? What do we both believe in? How can we work together on the things that we do believe in? Because my God, there's a lot to work on, right?
The word I would describe for what I would like for the future is accountability. I want people to be able to see their successes and be like, oh, that's good, we should grow from that. And I want them to also see their failures as a society and be able to, oh, let's grow from that.
I don't personally believe in reparations. I know that's something that's very controversial, very hot right now, but I think whatever, your ancestors did is not your problem. Because of that, I don't believe in having to compensate for these other, what your ancestors, quote unquote ancestors did to other people's ancestors. Who my parents are, whatever they've done has no bearing on who I am. Well, I mean, obviously it does, but it has no, I'm not responsible for their actions, just as how they are not responsible for their parents' actions.
Without some recognition and reconciliation for past injustices, it's very difficult for a society to move forward. I don't know if that's more, though, on a society-wide level, because on a personal level, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel guilty for something that other people have done before I was born. I don't. Do I think the society should take responsibility and recognize the injustices that have been perpetrated on groups of people historically and make amends and reparations for that in any way they can? Yes, I do. So I think as a society, absolutely. As individuals going around feeling guilty, I don't think that's a very productive emotion. I mean, I have ancestors who did crappy things, and I know who they are and I know what they did, and some of it was really bad. Am I responsible for that? Absolutely not. I have no responsibility for that. I would have responsibility for that if I profited from it, if I continued to do it, if I celebrated it, but I don't do any of those things. I think that was terrible, and so I disassociate myself with that aspect of the past. I recognize it, but I didn't do it. I wasn't even here. What I need to do is take responsibility for what I can do in this world now moving forward, and how can I try to make the world a better place.
It's not fair to group all white people as one thing, because they're not all one white thing. That's the same as grouping all black people as one thing. Some people like being different. They like having a label to them. Oh, I'm Muslim. People put labels to them, and they like that. The scene with sexuality, I know it's like people are like, oh, I'm pansexual, and they identify with all their heart. They get the flag, they get everything, and so you just see people like identifying with one thing. I agree that people need to identify as human first. People can be hypocritical, they can be terrible, but they can also be good. They can have passion, they can have love for things, and it's okay to have your labels. It's okay to have your groups and your social friends, but it's also important to have your people, the world you were born in, because there's only one that we know of, and we have to cherish it while we have it.
The way in which Black Lives Matter, at least as it was originally articulated, was very much also trying to integrate insights from different systems of oppression and center them all around that one targeted message, which was about the value and necessity of protecting Black lives. So that they had a queer and feminist, as well as sort of all the tradition of civil rights activism going through that movement. With the murder of George Floyd, we saw just how powerful it could be, not only in the States, but around the world. People really responded to that horrible, horrible murder, which unfortunately is just one of so many brutal murders that absolutely have to stop. So it's beautiful that so many people were willing to go out and, stand up for that and say something about that. So it was very powerful, definitely. And it is a very powerful movement.
My hope is in the future is to keep spreading words of different things that are happening that people aren't knowing. I know I'm just a high school graduate and I know I can't do a lot, but I'm going to try to do more. And because I know with my two hands, if I just am able to change a little, it will hopefully have a bigger effect in things. Because if you pick up a tiny stone from a path, you're still helping that path to slowly get clearer and clearer. Because then if some people see you picking up a sharp stone from the path, other people would hopefully join and help pick up sharp stones from that path. And so that's my opinion.
Social justice is freedom and access.
Social justice is the use of politics beyond electoral means to achieve freedom.
I think social justice in any forms is simply seeking progress, making sure that every group, every subgroup, minority in, I'll say America for example, because that's where we are, that they have reached equality. And right now in this country, that's simply not true.
Social justice isn't me getting to be a capitalist too.
So many people are hurting in this country because we have not reached progress for them. We have not reached equality. So social justice in any form is necessary.
I grew up in Hollywood. I was raised in Englewood, but I grew up in Hollywood. My friend who was from Cuba was newly arrived, and he called the police because he said he was sick of people dealing drugs at his grandmother's house, next door to his grandmother's house. And I remember we all told him, we said, you do not conjure LAPD, you just don't do it. He didn't believe it, he didn't believe it because, I think in a way, some ways he felt he felt he was white. He didn't understand who he was because his family had just came here recently. He didn't understand because he said, well, who's going to protect us? We need to call the police. Police are good people. The police came, pulled guns on us, had us sitting on the curb, said they were going to kill us, throw the boys in the LA River. And I remember thinking in my head, I was right.
Places that are under police and have a large amount of money going into them, whether it be their school system, mental health, the job sector, anything like that, people can continuously help themselves in those areas and stay afloat, whereas in other regions that happen to be minority regions in certain cities are underfunded, the school systems are underfunded and over-policed, which just leads to higher crime rates simply because there are more police there. It's not necessarily because there are more crimes, which is it's a continuous cycle of making sure that the people on top stay on top and the people on the bottom can't lift themselves up.
So who is to protect us? The thing is this, the police is really just not an option. For the African-American community, the Black community, the local police have been really super violent towards us. The federales, the federal police have been very violent towards Indigenous Americans, Native Americans.
All of the institutions in this country are racist, and all the public institutions are intended to benefit a singular group of people. And if you do not belong to that group of people, you're gonna get crumbs. The cake is not for you. They might throw you a few crumbs, but what you're gonna be offered is never gonna be comparable to what the dominant group will receive. And what happens in the United States is that wealthy parents are able to enter into a school district and use public resources in such a way that they control them almost as if they're private resources.
Owing to the idea of manifest destiny, which is that the white man is ordained by God to take over this entire country. If you are Native, if you are Indigenous, you are viewed as guilty because you are on land that God ordained to white people. And that's part of American history. And the same thing with Black people. If you are Black, your job is to serve white people. If you are out on the street without a uniform on, without permission from your white boss, you are guilty. You're guilty of trying to be free. My great-great-great-grandfather came to Los Angeles from Louisiana. It was a wonderful place for Black people. You could own property. It was not nearly as prejudiced. You look at my grandfather's high school yearbook, and it was a mixed race class in Los Angeles. And then, William Parker decided, oh, these people are too free. We need to start beating heads in regards to the African-American community and the Chicano community in Los Angeles. And they imported in Southern cops, like racist Southern cops, specifically because the Black and Chicano people were too free. And they didn't want that. That was not something that was not going to help capitalism. That was not going to help sell houses. That was not going to help with building division between Black and white and Chicano people. Who owns the media? What are they trying to portray? What are they trying to desensitize?
I think bias in the news it's an extremely harmful and dangerous thing that we're seeing in society today, especially because, I mean, it's just fact that people tend to flock to news sources that affirm their beliefs.
I think that the media widely misinforms people and misrepresents the United States.
People show killing, police brutalizing Black people over and over again. You'll even see pictures of people who are Black who are killed, but you rarely see that with white people.
The news most definitely plays a part in people's opinions on situations, what people think is right and wrong, especially because the news sources nowadays, a lot of them are so biased.
The media and the commentators won't plainly name the problems that exist in the United States. They won't name racism, they won't name white supremacy, they won't name misogyny. They'll use terms like racial tensions or a volatile situation.
I think the fact that a lot of people have completely closed themselves off to acknowledging the other side of the spectrum, the other side of what they may believe, it's harmful because it's keeping people extremely closed-minded. It's not letting them experience the reality of a lot of other people in the world.
It's like people of color, Black, Latinx, Indigenous people, Native Americans. It's as if we're supposed to be heard. That's our role.
Media organizations are propped up by elites and capitalism is racialized.
In order to show things in a fair way, you actually have to, shape things, because the shape of media and presentation in the United States is already racist. If you do nothing, it's going to be racist. So you have to do something.
I think there's a journalistic standard that's developed in the United States, and there's a style of journalistic language that creates the illusion of objectivity. An example of that would be the type of voice that reporters use when they write for the New York Times. There's this sense that there's a third person who's omniscient, who's commenting in this very passive voice, not very many I statements, when in reality, a person's opinions are being channeled through that style.
This whole idea, like, I'm just, objective means I show everything, even if I know it's a lie, even if I know it's pathologizing, even if I know because of, it's kind of like, I'll use, for example, speeding tickets, automated speeding tickets. Well, when people thought they made it so that robots or machines used gave out the tickets, it would be given out equitably, it wouldn't be racist. But the thing is, the system is set up already to be racist. It's institutionally racist. It doesn't need an individual.
White money is producing the news that we're consuming.
I've been trying to stop using the term people of color because we are talking about Mexican Americans. We're talking about Native Americans. We're talking about Black people. And I want us to remember to not erase who those people are, because that's the whole thing. That's another thing with media. It's like everything is centered around, oh, well, person of color, just a person who is not white, just some random thing. We all have different histories here, and those histories should be respected.
So Latinx, to me, is a term that's used for political organizing here in the United States. It's like this banner under which we can unite. The difficulty, though, with diaspora is that in our case, we're a really heterogeneous group of people. Latin America includes all of the islands in the Caribbean. It includes Mexico. It includes Central America. And so you have really, really, really varied people. And then you also have the problem of white supremacy in Latin America. Because let's be real, like, white supremacy exists everywhere. White supremacy just functions slightly differently in Latin American countries. But because Latin American countries also promote white supremacy, when we try to organize here in the United States as diaspora, we then run the risk of reproducing those same supremacist systems that exist here in the United States and that we have inherited from whatever culture we may have come from or our parents may have come from.
My full name is Dr. Angela Sadler Williamson.
My name is Alvin Irby.
My name is Luke Merrill.
I actually go by numerous titles. First, as an educator, speaker. I also go by filmmaker. What I've been able to add over the last year is author.
I'm the founder and chief reading inspirer at Barbershop Books. We create child-friendly reading spaces in barbershops.
When I grow up, I hope to be a lawyer.
I've spent the last 5 years working on and promoting and releasing a documentary, My Life with Rosie, about Rosa Parks. When I chose to do a documentary on Rosa Parks, I knew that there were a lot of different parts to Rosa Parks, more than what I learned in my history books. But really what I started to learn more about is social justice. When I look at social justice, I look at it as an umbrella, and it's an umbrella of different things underneath it. And so when a lot of times we think social, we think of social injustice. So what would the opposite of that be, and what would social justice be?
I think social justice is groups of people fighting against some type of social inequity, right? Some type of injustice.
Social justice to me is defined as everyone has the same rights. No one is greater or less than someone else. Everyone should be equal to each other.
Well, that would be the protection of our human rights. That would be when we talk about systemic racism, that would be the absence of that. But really what that would be is this would be the world accepting others and understanding based on others' differences.
As a Black man in America, I think it's not unusual to experience social injustice. I mean, I was in a regular English class where we were reading short stories and doing spelling tests in 10th grade English. And then I switched into an advanced English class and they were reading novels and writing book reports. I didn't choose my regular English class. A counselor or a registrar or someone put me in that class. How is it that they decided that that was where I should be, whereas other kids got put into advanced classes?
At my school once, there was this kid who unfortunately had a bad experience with someone of a race, and then after that he defined the whole race as that bad person, which is wrong, and he should be able to forgive them even though what that one person did was not okay. It still shouldn't make him be afraid of everyone else in that group.
When I think about social injustice, sometimes I think about the way it physically manifests itself in my life. So for example, when I see police cars, if I'm driving or walking, I literally get anxious. Like my blood pressure goes up. Or I look around and I'm not even doing anything. Like, why am I even, and so I think about how the cumulative effects of social injustice play out for lots of people. And here I am, somebody who has 2 master's degrees, right? So, people have this idea that, well, if you just do what you're supposed to do, these things won't affect you, but that's not often the case, right? And a lot of the social injustices that I've experienced are not unique to me.
One of the things I talk about when I started doing this documentary on Rosa Parks, because I realized for years what I learned about Rosa Parks in my history class wasn't quite who the real Rosa Parks was. I looked at her experience. And a lot of times they put in books, they put Rosa Parks was tired. Well, a lot of people think, well, she was physically tired. And I mean, come on, who isn't after a full day of work? But really what they miss is that she really wasn't physically tired. She was emotionally tired, and she was tired of being treated with far less respect than every human deserves. This was 1955, and because of people like Rosa Parks, who helped start that modern day civil rights movement, you would think in 2015, me as an African American woman who is just now has received her doctoral degree, that I wouldn't have the same types of issues that Rosa Parks did. And even though there were laws in place in 1955 that, because of her movement, banned all legal discrimination, there's still that systemic racism that people get away with. And so in 2015, that's what I was facing. When I started this documentary, I had a doctoral degree and no job. And it wasn't because I wasn't qualified. It was because there were protocols put in place that would stop me from advancing into the career I so desired. Thank goodness I had the support of my family and my husband, who knew that I needed something, and that something was go back to the history and learn from the woman who faced this kind of discrimination when it was legal, and take wisdom from her. What we're seeing in 2020 is that we're seeing what's happened is that, yes, all legal discrimination is banned because we have the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and we have the 1965 Voting Rights Act. But the systemic racism is still there. And I think that's what has been happening over the last 3 months, is people are starting to really look at how are we using systemic racism as another form of segregation.
I feel like my work, with Barbershop Books is trying to do is to inspire children to read and to help them understand that they can be in control of when, what, and where they read. I think that when a child understands that, then they can learn anything they want to know.
Rosa Parks, she was an extraordinary person, but she was human. And a lot of times we don't realize that we have the power within us to make change. Well into the film festival run for this, I still felt that I had absolutely no power to make change. Although I was making change with this documentary. And I think a lot of times we don't realize the power that our gifts that we've been given have to make a difference. Her power was her quiet stance and knowing what was right or wrong and standing behind that, even if it cost her. And it cost her dearly in a lot of different ways. I learned that I have been given the superpower of storytelling to make a difference. Even when I look at it, I never felt I had that power. And so I know that with everything there, everyone has their own superpower. We don't always see it because it's us. We're looking at ourselves. But one way that you can evaluate what your superpower is by setting your intention. Every act you make is saying that every person can make a difference. And I think that's what happens and why we get to this level of civil unrest, is because you have so many people feeling that they're powerless, but they're actually not. They have inside them the opportunity to make the positive change. Someone just needs to let them know that.
Some changes I would like to make personally to help social justice are things just like helping the community. There's people who, like I said, have lost their jobs, and we need to help those people. For the people who haven't, we need to start different kinds of clubs and build a better community to help others. And just doing some volunteer work or simply making someone smile might make a big difference.
I think that my main advice to younger generations would be to try the asparagus. I speak at middle schools and high schools, even colleges, and whenever I'm speaking in front of young people, one of the questions I ask them is, have you ever tried asparagus? And every single time there are hands that go up. In the Bronx, I was at a middle school and a majority of the kids had never tasted asparagus, and they were middle schoolers. I use asparagus as a metaphor for all the new and different experiences that you may have an opportunity to participate in. And I explained to them, I'm not saying you should like asparagus. I'm just saying you should try it. I think that the careers, the jobs, the journeys that a lot of young people maybe are supposed to be on, they may not even know, those careers exist. They might even know that path exists. And I think that one of the best ways of discovering what it is that you were born to do, what it is that you can do better than anybody else on the planet, is by being willing to try the asparagus.